Today, Google just dropped Gemini 3, and they didn't just release a new model, they tried to delete the concept of application entirely. So that's a pretty good cold open. So the phrase that's been around for the past 15 years, there's an app for that, is going to become very archaic very soon if this takes off. Before we start, a quick shout out to my channel sponsor, Joa. They make the best accessories for your Tesla and other EVs and have amazing warranties and customer service too. I use their accessories daily. Check the link in the description and get 5% off a fan-cooled phone charger, a portable tire inflator, a fold-out laptop table, and so much more. Oh, and they make perfect gifts for your EV-loving friends too. So check out the description and get 5% off, and now let's get back to it. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. If you didn't catch it yet, a few days ago I tried out Grok 4.1, which is supposed to be very good at creative writing and thinking and all of that kind of stuff. And it did not go particularly well, but I figured that with Gemini 3 coming out and the internet kind of losing its collective mind about Gemini 3, I thought, let's go ahead and test Gemini 3 out in kind of the same way that I tested out Grok 4.1, which is to basically ask it to help me to generate this video itself, to come up with suggestions of things to do. We're also going to try out the new version of Nano Banana here. I've got it in a separate tab so we can try that out as well. But basically the test here is going to be a meta test to ask it to help me to generate this very episode itself. And let's see how it does. That's going to require some agentic capabilities, some self-awareness, and of course the ability to understand itself and to come up with some ideas about how I can test it interactively here. And with what people are saying about how well Gemini works, I'm expecting this to go well, but I also expected the test with Grok 4.1 to work really well, and it did not. So let's see how this does. So for a kind of apples to apples comparison, I copied and tweaked the prompt that I gave Grok 4.1 as a starter here. So anyway, you can see I'm telling it right here that it's on the spot, right? And that I want it to help me create this video. I gave it my YouTube channel name and I said, you know, I want something that tests its fuzzy reward modeling. And of course I have the announcement up over here if I want to look at it as well. And then I'm sort of testing its self-awareness here in a meta way. Remember, I'm recording this so you're on camera creating the video while you come up with the best manner of presenting the video. So I want to test its ability to kind of split its mind and understand and wink at the audience and everything. So let's go ahead and see. You can see I've got the thinking model, and this is thinking with 3 Pro here. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this up and we will see how it goes. So as this thinks, you'll notice up in the right-hand corner that I do not have Gemini Pro anymore. This was part of the culling that happened. I reduced pretty much everything back to the minimum bare bones, and I went from the $200 a month ChatGPT down to $20 a month, and I reduced this to 0 because I really wasn't using Gemini at all. Now, if Gemini 3 proves out to be amazing, and I decide that I want to use it instead of ChatGPT, I can obviously shift my money around and spend my $20 a month on using Gemini rather than ChatGPT, but we will see here. So, okay, show thinking. Let's do this. Since we're recording, we need to keep the energy high and the workflow tight. We're going to bridge the gap between raw information and compelling narrative. Phase 1, here's our game plan for this session. So the interesting thing is here, this is doing better than Grok 4.1, absolutely, but it's still not directly talking to you, the audience. I would expect it to break the fourth wall just a little bit more instead of talking directly to me, to understand that you all are going to be reading this as well. But anyway, it's definitely better. Number one, just the amount of stuff that it said, although it's still relatively minimal compared to what ChatGPT would do if I asked it the same question. All right, so first thing, it's asking me to paste in the text of the announcement or describe the image chart you're looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will also give it a link as well. And then it's asking other questions as well. I think I'm going to say the deep dive and then the thumbnail first approach. I don't think we need that. The narrative arc, the script. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give it the answers that I can here. At least it's asking me some reasonable questions before it goes off and starts thinking. All right, so I gave it some answers here. You can read this and pause it if you want to. And then I copied the text of all of this stuff. Lots and lots of crap here. I just copied the page and gave it to it. So let's see. We'll fire it up and see what it has to say. So it's definitely thinking longer than the earlier versions of Gemini, but I mean, that's the whole point, is it's the thinking model. So we'll refine the approach. We'll see what it has to say about all of this when it gets done. All right, and here we go. Adjust virtual tie checks microphones. So this is way better than Grok already because it's got a little bit of a wink to the audience here. We're rolling this fantastic material, Gemini 3 dropping November 2025 with Google anti-gravity, which is a good thing. I didn't tell it about that specifically, but that's definitely a good catch. That's their IDE that they just dropped along with Gemini 3, and generative UI question mark. I'm not sure. Okay, this is the pivot point where AI stops being a chatbot and starts being an interface and an employee. So that's a pretty good take on this. This is where we're going from utilizing it to ask some questions to actually treating it as if it was another person person, an agent that's able to do things on its own. And you could say, hey, go off and do a complex task, and it could come back and do that for you. So that's basically where we are at the end of 2025. That is the state of the art. All right. And then we get the deep dive idea. Here's the structure for the video. For the last 2 years, we've been talking about multimodality and reasoning as separate features. We had models that could see, Gemini 1, models that could think, Gemini 2, but today Google just dropped Gemini 3, and they didn't just release a new model. They tried to delete the concept of application entirely. So that's a pretty good cold open. We're looking at generative UI and a platform called Anti-Gravity. If you're a developer, your job just changed. If you're a user, your phone is about to change. Let's dive deep. And you can see here, section 2, the breakdown, the what. So it's saying what's going on. Section 3, the technical demo with a Python thing. Let's see, what did it actually build? So it's saying it's a Python simulation of this logic. Okay, so perceive, reason, act, observe, result. We'll see what happens. This is the zero-shot test you asked for. I'm generating a clean, object-oriented representation of react, reasoning, and acting agent loop. Cool. That's actually pretty cool. So yeah, we'll see what that does. Then we get to section 4, the implications, section 5, the wrap-up. Okay, so let's go into this in a little bit more detail here. And of course, I forgot to ask it about Nano Banana. We can test that out separately. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the what. So Gemini 1 was perception. So what it did was it took a sort of historical bent. It looked at this as Gemini 1 was perception, eyes and ears. Gemini 2 was reasoning, the brain. And Gemini 3 is positioned as the body, action. So I like that. That's something I would not have thought of myself. That's actually a really cool take on how the different Geminis are related to each other. The key keywords here are Google, anti-gravity, and generative UI. Think about that phrase, generative UI, and that is user interface. That means that you're creating the interface as you go. You no longer need, I'm using Chrome right now, right, which is Google's product, but I'm using Chrome to do this. It's a web browser. It's the interface that presents itself. But the goal, as Andre Karpathy and others have talked about, is to create the user interface as you go, kind of live. So basically you have a database, you have some repository of data that you've got, and you want a user interface that is just flexible. It just pops up the correct user interface for whatever kind of task that you're trying to do with the data at hand. And so that means that the UI goes from being a static thing, right? You download a version of Chrome and that's what you've got until there's an update to it, to something that is generated interactively as you go. And you can be like, I don't like that interface. Can you move this upgrade button from the right to the left? I mean, something simple like that, to having something massively different, like a completely different UI, different interface or something. So this is a really good way to cast this version of Gemini, the way that Google is thinking about it and why everybody is losing their mind about Google right now. So as it continues here, right now, when you open an app, the buttons are hard-coded. A developer decided where the submit button goes, right? Or the upgrade button or whatever. Google is claiming that with Gemini 3, the UI itself is generated on the fly based on what you're trying to do. The app is no longer a static thing you download. It's a dynamic surface that morphs to fit your intent. So that's actually pretty cool and not something I've heard other people talk about in the reviews that I've read or watched on YouTube, etc. So now we're getting to the technical demo, the coding tests. Now I know a lot of you are asking, I guess that's me, what does agentic coding actually mean and what is this anti-gravity platform? To understand this, we have to understand the agent loop. Most software today is linear. Input A leads to output B. An agent, which Gemini 3 is optimized for, operates in a loop. It perceives the world, it reasons about that, it acts on the world, and it observes the result. And if you think about that, that's biological. That's what we do. We perceive what's around us. We then reason about that, or sometimes you act on instinct, right? If you touch a hot stove, that's going to hopefully give you a signal immediately. And that sort of reasoning thing is short-circuited and you just act immediately. But anyway, under normal circumstances, you might look around and say, what am I seeing right now? Or what am I feeling? All of that kind of stuff. You then act on the environment. And this is where the agentic element comes in. Because what is your desire? Are you trying to get a drink of water because you're thirsty? Are you looking at the deer that are grazing in your front yard? Are you happy about that? Are you upset about that because they're eating your garden? The reasoning into act part of this loop is the really, really important part, because that's where the agentic nature comes in. Otherwise, you're just a chatbot. Somebody feeds you some information and says like, hey, what is this a picture of? You analyze it and you spit back out the results. That's not really reasoning. That's just sort of doing input to output like traditional computing, even though it's using neural networks. But this new version adds the reasoning and act part in between, and then it observes the result, which is effectively the perception step over again, right? So you tie the loop closed. So it's a closed loop. The observation of the result is what am I perceiving now versus what I just perceived a moment ago before I reasoned and then acted on my environment. And if things went well, you keep doing what you were doing. If things went badly and you got to course correct or something, then you course correct and adjust and try again. So it's this closed loop that's going on. And then I guess I'm supposed to say, I want to show you a quick Python simulation of this logic to demonstrate why this is so much harder than standard coding and why a dedicated platform like anti-gravity is necessary. So supposedly this is a clean, object-oriented representation of react, reasoning and acting agent loop, which is the fundamental architecture behind systems like Gemini 3 and anti-gravity. So let's just go ahead and copy the code. We'll put it in VS Code and cross our fingers that it will work. So as you can see, this is only 85 lines long. It's not that long. So let's just go ahead and see what happens when we run it. All right, so I guess there's not really a UI or anything. It just kind of printed out some output here. It said goal received, build a custom analytics interface, invoking tool, search database with query, observation, found specs, iteration 2, invoking tool, observation, dynamic dashboard element, iteration 3, task completed successfully. So I'm not exactly sure what it looks like. It worked, but I'm not exactly sure what it was supposed to do. So I may need to ask it about that. So it does have an explanation down here. This code is simple, but it illustrates the point. The think method isn't just running a script. It's evaluating the state of the world and deciding what to do next. With Gemini 3 and anti-gravity, Google is giving us the framework to run millions of these loops reliably without writing the boilerplate code I just showed you. They are abstracting away the loop so we can focus on the goal. So I'm going to ask it to create more of a graphical representation of that before we get to the implications. Okay, so I asked it to create a more graphical version of this, so we'll go ahead and fire that up. And actually, weirdly enough, it's generating the image with Nano Banana. So I didn't mean to test Nano Banana right now, but apparently what we're going to get is an image of this rather than the actual thing. That's a little unfortunate. That is a misunderstanding, a pretty basic misunderstanding, because I think, okay, that's an excellent point. Text scrolling is a terminal, terrible B-roll. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what the new Python. Okay, so I don't know. It said it was generating something with Nano Banana, but it didn't. So I'm a little confused about that. I guess maybe it started in that direction and then decided not to. But anyway, it looks like it's attempting to do this in a more graphical modality. Okay, so it's going to output frame 01, frame 02, etc. That seems like not the best way to do this, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to run it and see what happens. And again, when we copy this, it's still very, very short. So let's go ahead and see what happens. And we've got an error. Boo. So as I thought, NetworkX is already installed, so I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that, but we will make an attempt. I was hoping I wasn't going to have to do any kind of correction live, but such is life. So one thing I will say is that Gemini 3 is a lot slower than Gemini 2.5 was. Now, I know it's a more thinking model and stuff like that, but I am noticing that it is significantly slower in terms of getting an answer back. So I already did NetworkX matplotlib. Oh, maybe I don't have that sub-library there. All right, so it did install something new. I guess these libraries, Python and libraries, that's always the thing, isn't it? So let's see. Nope, we still have the exact same problem. So interestingly enough, it did give me a mermaid chart as an optional backup here. So it is kind of cognizant of the fact that we're doing the presentation, which I actually like, the fact that it's going like, hey, wait, let's stopgap this, the show must go on fix, which is the mermaid diagram. So interesting idea there. So let's go ahead and copy this into Mermaid Live here, and we can take a look at this. Here, let me move this over just a little bit. Start, perceive, context and input, reason, needs info, task done, finished, act, tool execution, observe tool output, and back up to the perceive step. I'm not exactly sure why I can't do this in a graphical sense. That seems kind of silly, but there you go. But at least we have a diagram of what it's talking about. And so actually it gave me a new option, which is the zero dependency version. So we're going to use a turtle instead. All right. And I'm still getting errors, so it's not worth it. So that's unfortunate because that means it was unable to do that, but also Python is Python. It's a thing. Maybe it should have done it in JavaScript. Maybe that would have been a better idea. So interestingly enough, it says zero fail potential and it still failed. And weirdly, it's saying the problem is it doesn't have tkinter, which is very strange because I know I have that. I don't know. So anyway, there's something weird going on, but Turtle Graphics should definitely work. That's strange that it's not working. So anyway, let's get back to the implications, the so what part. So why does this matter? Because of Firebase AI Logic, and Firebase is a database that you've got. And I talked about that at the beginning, right? You have your database and you directly interact with your data. It generates the UI on the fly instead of having to go through a standardized user interface. And as it says right here, the generative UI SDK. If you can combine that reasoning loop with a user interface that builds itself, we are moving away from apps and towards solutions. You won't download a travel app. You will tell your phone, plan my trip, and the generative UI will construct a temporary interface just for that trip, booking flights, showing maps, handling tickets, and then dissolve when the task is done. The App Store model is about to be disrupted by the agent model, which is very interesting because, of course, Google has a giant App Store along with Apple, but Google is willing to blow up that App Store. Quite clearly, it's willing to go directly to the data and to create an interface for an audience of one, which is the same thing that we've been talking about in other realms as well. We've talked about creating songs songs for an audience of one. We've talked about creating movies for an audience of one. The idea of AI is that you can actually target things specifically for the individual. So if I'm traveling, and I actually am traveling next week, I could just ask it to generate a user interface, a planned trip with a calendar, perhaps things that I could do, options, restaurants to go to, you name it. It could just generate all of that stuff on the fly. And I could tell it this, like, no, I'm not interested in that. I don't care about restaurants. I want to do something else. Focus on that instead. Whatever you want, it would interactively generate and regenerate the UI to make you satisfied, to allow you to accomplish the task. And then after the task is over, it just goes away because it's not necessary anymore. So you don't have this extra app that's sitting around on your phone or on your laptop. So the phrase that's been around for the past 15 years, there's an app for that, is going to become very archaic very soon if this takes off. And then the wrap up, Google is betting the farm that the future isn't just smarter answers, but smarter actions. Gemini 3 isn't a chatbot, it's an engine for doing things. Let me know in the comments what you think about this, right? Like and subscribe, all that stuff. So it's got that idea at the end of it as well. And by the way, FYI, liking and subscribing really does help the channel out. So of course, that's the reason I mention it in every video, because it really does help out. And thank you all for the folks that actually have done that. All right, so with that being said, let's finish on a graphical flurry here. We'll do an image or two with Nano Banana and see how it works here. So we've got Nano Banana Pro, panel 1, a mobile interface on Gemini rendered in a poetic watercolor ink style. So there you go. Interesting enough. I did not come up with this prompt, by the way. I'm going to give it one now. But I would say that is really good. The consistency of style, the fact that it's doing text and everything really well. Damn, that's amazing. So let's go ahead and ask it to create a thumbnail for the video. Gemini 3 release, blowing people's minds, viral video style. Let's see what it comes up with. I don't know what the viral video style is going to do. It may make it go kind of crazy or something like that, but we will see how it does in terms of generating an image. So yeah, it does what I asked it to do. I don't think I'm going to use that as my thumbnail, but anyway, maybe I will. Maybe I'll do an A/B test and I'll actually make this one of my thumbnail options and see what people think about that. And then you guys can tell me whether you think my version or this version is the better one. And so since I'm not feeling particularly creative today, I'm going to ask it to generate 3 wacky prompts for Nano Banana to generate challenging images. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these over into Nano Banana. All right, so let's see what it has to say. A sentient quantum entanglement of a banana and a smoothie existing simultaneously as liquid. Okay, that's a pretty good prompt. That's challenging to like imagine what it would come up with for this. Yeah, I'm not particularly satisfied with that. That's okay. I think I can imagine something a little bit better than that. Now, I mean, it's cool that it did it, but I don't think that that's quite right. Next up, a infinitely self-replicating banana. Each new banana slightly different and more abstract than the last, spiraling into a cosmic vortex. Wow. Okay, and then the pupil of an unblinking, thousand-eyed elder god who's tears. Oh my goodness. All right, these are pretty wild prompts that it's asking it to do. Oh, okay, that is way more successful. That is incredibly creepy, but also I think does a pretty good job of nailing what the prompt asks for. And I guess everything is banana themed because this one is a gigantic hyper-realistic banana, bending space-time around it like a funhouse mirror. The gravitational lensing distorts the fabric of reality, revealing fragmented memories of the banana's past lives as other fruits. Oh my goodness. Again, I'm not exactly sure it got that, but these are pretty wild prompts it's asking for. It's definitely very abstract. The tears of the banana and the eye, this stuff is very creepy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do one of my own here. Generate a hyper-realistic image of a warthog and a polar bear. I don't know why. Both wearing medieval armaments like a sword in a sheath or a quiver of arrows and a bow, walking through a post-apocalyptic landscape version of Los Angeles. So let's take a look at what it comes up with. This sounds like a great movie, right? Okay, that's, yeah, I mean, we've got a crossbow, we've got a sword, he's holding the sword blade, that may be not the best idea, and the bow is not quite right. It looks like the actual string of the bow is not right, it goes through his hand and not straight across, and he's got an arrow that's actually notched into the bow at this point, plus he's got a sword in his other hand, and it looks like he also might be cutting his fingers off with the sword blade, but generally, overall, I love the Hollywood touch. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I would say this is actually pretty darn good, so I'm actually not too dissatisfied. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Alrighty folks, so with all of that being said, what is my conclusion about this? My conclusion is that Gemini 3 appears to be working much better than something like Grok 4.1, but of course I need much more testing to be able to actually fulfill what it's suggesting it can do, which is to replace the traditional user interface with a just-in-time user interface that's created for an audience of one and dissolves as soon as the job is over. If Gemini 3 and 3.1 and 3.2, etc. can live up to that possibility, then it's going to be a game changer and change change the world. And Google, amazingly enough, 2 years ago, who would have given them a chance? But now it appears they could very easily come from behind in the AI space and take over the world again, which is ironically exactly why Elon Musk and Sam Altman started OpenAI, was to actually combat against Google, because they saw them as the big threat. For quite a while, it appeared that Google wasn't, but it's also possible that Google was kind of hiding in the shadows a little bit and sandbagging things and trying not to create too much of a stir until they were ready. Well, now it looks like they're ready, and it looks like with Gemini 3 and with Nano Banana to a lesser extent, that's not as important, but it looks like Gemini 3 is really swinging for the fences and trying to hit a home run in terms of changing the way that we actually interact with computers. Alrighty, folks, that's what I've got for you today. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. I'm actually personally very excited to see the user interface go away, because I think that it is rather clunky, and if this can be done right, it's going to be amazing, but of course it remains to be seen if it's going to be able to be done right. So let me know your thoughts about that. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, like I said earlier, it really helps out, and consider subscribing for more of this kind of content, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.